Numbers don't lie. The United States is sitting on more than $37 trillion in national debt, a number so large it almost seems unreal. It flashes across the U.S. debt clock in neon red digits, a countdown disguised as accounting. Every second, the numbers jump, fluctuate, then accelerate, like an overheated machine. Most people see this and shrug. Politicians smile on television. The market is still open. The dollar can still buy coffee. But behind the cameras and committee hearings, there is a truth the public never wants to hear. The U.S. government has no plans to repay this debt. It plans to eliminate that, not by declaring bankruptcy, not by raising taxes, not by cutting spending, but by the way to value the currency in which the debt is denominated. And the tools they are preparing quietly, strategically, deliberately, are the same tools most Americans believe exist. Outside government control, cryptocurrency and gold. 1. The illusion of paying debt. When a household is in debt, the math is simple. Work more, save more, sell the property, pay it off. But the government doesn't play by the rules of the household. It writes the rules. The government can change in the value of a dollar, redefine your own asset value, inflating the cost of what it owes. Shifting purchasing power quietly and silently, make all debts evaporate in real terms, even if the numbers on paper remain the same. Here's the greatest magic trick in economics: a default disguised as policy. And America has performed this magic trick many times before. But before we get into this, you must understand a simple economic truth. Debt does not necessarily have to be paid. It may be destroyed, not by wiping out the numbers, but by making those numbers meaningless. If the government owes $37 trillion and the dollar loses 50 to 70% of its purchasing power, then reality, the burden of that debt is reduced, even though the nominal figure remains the same. This is called currency reset, not a conspiracy, not fiction. But this is the historical model used by every great empire in decline, and America is preparing its most sophisticated version yet, to a feverish opening. Imagine a split screen. Left side, a nurse in Ohio, checked her retirement account and saw that the balance had not increased, but had actually decreased. Her grocery bills were getting longer. Gas prices had gone up twice in 1 week. Her rent had gone up by hundreds of dollars. She felt poorer, but she couldn't figure out why. Right side, Wall Street traders stare at giant green candles on Bitcoin charts. Sovereign wealth funds buy gold bullion by the ton. Federal Reserve officials hold closed-door meetings. Statements are vague, markets are volatile. And quietly, in a temperature-controlled vault beneath the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, a mountain of gold rests valued on books at a price that hasn't been updated in half a century. The camera zoomed out. A calm voice rang out, "They will not default, they will depreciate, and they will use the very assets that you consider off-system to do that." Give title tag. Dark wire, cold light, a slow look through the barbed wire of economic data. 3. Why this is not a mistake. Conventional wisdom says America will get out of debt. America will tax the rich. America will cut spending. No, no, and definitely not. Here are 3 brutal truths. 1. U.S. debt is growing faster than the U.S. economy. If GDP grows 2 to 3% per year, but debt grows 8 to 10% per year, the gap will widen forever. 2. Tax hikes cannot pay the trillion-dollar interest bill. The interest rate alone is approaching $1.2 trillion a year, more than the defense budget, more than Medicare. 3. Cutting spending is political suicide. No politician can survive if he cuts Social Security, Medicare, or military spending. That would be career fulfillment. So the government chose the only remaining path. They inflated the debt, slow, quietly, legally, and more aggressively, if you're frugal. 4 initial plans. 1933-1934. To understand what is going to happen, we must look at what has happened. It is 1933 now. The Great Depression suffocated the U.S. economy. Banks are going bankrupt. Unemployment rate over 20%. The government is drowning in debt relative to GDP. So President Franklin D. Roosevelt undertook the most audacious financial shock therapy in American history. He signed Executive Order Number 6102. All private ownership of gold is prohibited. Americans had to give back their gold. They got $20.67 an ounce official price. Most complied because the economy was collapsing and people believed in the government's promise of stability. Then the government did something amazing. In 1934, the price of gold was revalued at $35 an ounce, up 69% overnight. What just happened? The United States has confiscated the country's gold supply. Citizens are paid at the old low rate, then revalued gold much higher, immediately increased the government's balance sheet, while simultaneously devaluing the dollar. Result, government debt has fallen sharply in a practical sense. Public purchasing power will decline over the next decade. A historical reset, a silent theft, an invisible political default. 2024-2025. Modern structure. Now fast forward. The United States is once again drowning in debt. But unlike in 1933, America is facing a new challenge. The global economy is highly interconnected, digitalized, and financialized. Today, simply confiscating gold will not work. But logic behind the reset remains unchanged. So instead of assembling one hard asset, the U.S. is preparing two: gold and cryptocurrencies. Not because they believe in sound money, not because they want a crypto revolution, but because these assets give them a way to reassessment of government reserves, devaluation of the dollar, reduce debt burden, and convince the public that it is innovation, not inflation. Let's analyze this problem. 6. Gold, the sleeping giant of America's balance sheet. United States ownership, 8,733 tons of gold, the largest official reserve on Earth. But here's the shocking part. In government records, this gold is valued at 42.22 an ounce. Not $2,800, not market price, $42. This issue was last updated in 1973. Why keep this absurd number? Simple. It gives the government room to revalue assets in an upward direction. Like 1934, if the U.S. revalues its gold to $10,000, $15,000, or the supposed price of $20,000 an ounce, the government would instantly create trillions of dollars in balance sheet strength without printing a single dollar. On paper, the U.S. financial situation appears to be on the mend. In fact, the dollar would be brutally devalued. But gold is only half of the strategy. The other half is digital. 7 Bitcoin, the new weapon of state power. The average American thinks Bitcoin is anti-government, a rebellion against the law, a decentralized fence against the system. But the U.S. government has a different view on Bitcoin, a tool, a reserve, a lever, a revaluable digital asset like gold. In 2024-2025, the United States has seized over 200,000 BTC from criminal cases. The court has granted a permanent confiscation order. Agencies begin discussions on strategic digital reserves. Politicians float idea of national Bitcoin reserve. Mining companies cooperate with federal energy programs. El Salvador's Bitcoin model attracts global attention. Behind the scenes, a new story emerged. Bitcoin is not the enemy. Bitcoin is the way out. Not for citizens, but for the U.S. government. Cryptocurrencies give Washington something invaluable, an asset they can reprice upward without admitting they are devaluing the dollar. This is the same mechanism used in 1934, only updated for the digital age. 8. Silent accumulation phase. Every reset has a quiet period, the stage where the pieces are moved subtly, without attracting public attention. Signs today include federal agencies quietly regulate Bitcoin Justice Department seizures. On the rise, Ministry of Finance discusses digital reserve strategy. SEC loosens regulations on crypto ETFs. Central banks around the world are buying gold at record levels. BRICS promotes commodity-backed alternatives. U.S. politicians openly compare Bitcoin to strategic oil reserves. This is not by chance, non-ideological. It is preparation. Just like the British and U.S. central banks hoarded gold before a major revaluation. Just like governments everywhere are building up reserves before currencies are re-established. And what about this time? The reset is larger because the debt is larger. The truth is, modern governments can't handle debt. Surname change it, surname shrank it. Surname dilute until the numbers on the screen no longer match the reality on the street. And this is exactly where the United States stands today, on the brink of a financial strategy that takes place quietly behind the scenes, hidden behind patriotic speeches, market optimism, and financial jargon that no one outside Washington can understand. But in the cold light of the real economy at truck stops, during nurses' shifts, in grocery store checkout lines, people have gotten a taste of what a reset looks like. Before the official announcement is made, inflation is not a glitch. It is the first symptom. The reset always starts before the public sees it. The government can't pay, it doesn't pay. It rewrites the rules. If an average family falls behind on their bills, they will tighten their budget. If a business falls behind, they will have to cut costs or go bankrupt. But when a nation-state falls behind, especially one that issues the world's reserve currency, their actions are quite different. It changed the definition of money, and quietly, step by step, the United States began building the architecture for the next monetary reinvention. Not what politicians describe, the real thing. An organization built behind closed doors, in Treasury war rooms, Federal Reserve board meetings, and legislative changes disguised as innovation, national security, or modernizing the financial infrastructure. Let's take a closer look at how the pieces fit together. Why $37 trillion can never be repaid. You can't solve the problem with optimism. Mathematically, the U.S. debt is no longer repayable in current dollar terms. Here's why. Debt is growing faster than GDP. Every year, this gap gets wider. Interest is compounded, over $1 trillion a year, soon to hit $1.5 trillion. Tax revenue is stagnant. Not because people aren't paying, but because wages aren't keeping up with costs. Mandatory spending is bound by law. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, obligations that cannot be cut without political suicide. Strategically, defense spending is non-negotiable. The Pentagon is not cutting its budget during times of global tension. So policymakers, economists, and advisors all quietly accepted the same conclusion. Unable to repay debt in strong dollars, must be paid in weaker dollars. This is the logic behind every debt restructuring in history. And today, the blueprint is even clearer. When the government wants to change the value of its currency, it never announces it. It builds infrastructure, firstly. It prepares legal scaffold. It sets up story foundation. It accumula to sasset. It plans to revalue. Then, only after everything is in place, does it pull the trigger. So ask yourself, why is the U.S. government suddenly building a national Bitcoin reserve? Why are they publicly advocating for digital asset infrastructure? Why did they draft the framework for a stable dollar partially backed by gold? And why, for the first time in 40 years, are U.S. officials publicly discussing reassessing the strategic importance of gold? This is not a coincidence. This is preparation. Let's learn about this mechanism, the secret of parallel balance sheets. When a government wants to cancel its debt, it cannot just print money openly, because markets will panic, inflation will skyrocket, confidence will collapse. So instead, it uses a cleaner technique, reevaluate what it owns, devalue what it owes. The United States owns yellow Bitcoin reserves, confiscated plus bought back, mineral assets, land, energy reserves, strategic reserves. The United States owes Treasury bonds, interest dollar debt. If asset prices rise while the value of the dollar falls, the government's balance sheet will improve without ever having to pay anything. This is how every history reset works. And now, for the first time, Bitcoin has appeared. Bitcoin, the government's new digital gold. For years, officials have scoffed at cryptocurrencies. Now they call it essential strategy. Why such a sudden change? Because Bitcoin is scarce, programmable, easy to store, borderless, undiluted, to mediocre to reevaluate. Increased its supply is fixed forever. Its price is R0. Perfect asset to reset debt. Backstage, the United States government confiscation Bitcoin from criminal cases, accept fine in BTC Bitcoin mining, with federal power building a strategic BTC reserve for national security. But the public story remains simple. America must innovate. We must lead in digital assets. Hidden meaning. Accumulate as much Bitcoin as possible before the reprice. Like gold in 1933. Gold, the silent giant of time. Waiting to be freed gold is the ancient reset tool. In 1933, the United States banned gold ownership, confiscated gold, and then revalued gold upward, immediately reducing the country's debt.
ago.
By 2025, they won't need to have seizures anymore. They have something even better. Book value is outdated. The United States government still holds gold at statutory value of $42.22 an ounce, not $2,800. Not market price, $42. The gap between book value and actual value is intentional, a hidden lever. A spring awaits. Because when the United States decided to modernize the statutory value of gold, they could revalue gold to $10,000, $15,000, even $20,000 an ounce. And that alone can create instant trillions of the new balance sheet value, all without mining a single extra gram, all without tax increase. There's absolutely no need to repay any loan. Bitcoin plus gold. New debt mechanism. With the combination of a digital asset that the government is quietly accumulating a physical asset that is undervalued on the books, the United States has the perfect tools to carry out the largest debt reduction in human history. But the reset also requires something else: crisis. Not a complete collapse, just enough instability to justify extraordinary measures. Debt ceiling deadlock, bond market panic, ratings downgraded, inflation spiking, a recession story. This is not a sign of failure. They are catalysts. They create the conditions for decisive action, which are encapsulated as follows: necessary to restore stability, essential to protecting American families, a strong decision for a strong dollar. The truth is the opposite. The real goal is a weaker dollar, a stronger balance sheet, a quiet debt service. How Reset Notebook works. Each currency reset follows the same structure. 1. Accumulation phase. Government quietly collects Bitcoin. Maintain gold reserves. Introducing the strategic coding language, creating a digital asset. Monitoring framework. Experimental balloon float on yellow background. Let inflation soften the ground. There are no notifications. Position only. 2. Crisis phase. Bond yields soar. Treasury bond auctions turn volatile. Political deadlock. Downgrade. Money flows out of the country. Public concern. Now the government has the necessary justification. 3. Reboot phase. Introducing the Strategic Bitcoin Reserve Fund. Revealing large BTC holdings. Announcement of new reserve valuation. High. Adjust gold price according to new regulations. New reserve-backed dollar stabilization policy. Announced Bitcoin skyrocketed. Gold prices rise again. The dollar depreciated in a downward trend. Debt is reduced without repayment. 4. Post-reset phase. The public was told the crisis was resolved. GDP looks healthier. Debt to GDP ratio declines. Article title praises. Financial recovery, but lagging wages. The collapse of savings eroded. Middle-class purchasing power evaporates. The government becomes stronger. The public became poorer. And the cycle begins again. Huarchu wins and why? Winner 1. The U.S. government. They clear their debt without defaulting. Winner 2. Hard asset owner. Bitcoin, gold, real estate, commodities skyrocket in nominal value. Winner 3. Foreign government with gold. China. Russia, India all benefit from rising gold prices. Winner 4. Top 1%. Their wealth lies in assets, not cash. Who loses and why? Loser 1. The saving person. Cash in the bank lost a lot of value. Loser 2. The bondholder. Treasury bonds are paid in depreciated dollars. Loser 3. The retiree. Fixed income cannot be adjusted for inflation. Loser 4. Worker wages have been rising much slower than prices. Loser 5. Middle class. The group holds the most cash and the least fixed assets. This is not personal. It is structural. The system rewards asset holders. The system punishes currency holders. Always the same, always the same. Global dimensions, BRICS and the multipolar shift. While the United States is preparing to rebuild, the BRICS countries are quietly working on their own version. Buy gold en masse trade. In local currency experiment with gold-linked settlements, reducing dependence on the dollar. This does not devalue the dollar. It ends the dollar monopoly. For the first time in 80 years, the United States must share monetary power. And that pressure speeds up the reset process. Because the longer America waits, its position is further weakened. What does this mean for the ordinary person? For the average American, this reset will not feel like a ceremony, or an announcement, or a press conference. It will look like this: double the amount of groceries, mountain climbing by air, rents boom savings are decreasing, dollars buy less each month, failed retirement plan, wages lag years behind the cost of living. The reset will feel like slow financial asphyxiation, but for the government, it will feel like survival. The reset, the crash, and the world after the dollar. The reset never comes with a siren call. It comes with a shrug. The incident occurred when a bond auction failed on Tuesday morning. When screens on Wall Street trading floors flash red before traders take their first sip of coffee. When Federal Reserve spokespeople hold a press conference, they sound calm, but their eyes show panic. In the darkness, the reset machine began to move. Because once you understand the structure, the accumulation, the crisis, the revaluation, you realize something terrifying. A reset is not an event. It is a sequence. A chain of events has begun. R.E. Burn. By the time the average American felt the first tremors, the foundation was already laid. Bitcoin is quietly flowing into the hands of governments through seizures, liquidations, late payments from crypto companies, and undisclosed mining operations. Gold remains locked in deep vaults, officially priced at an incredibly low statutory price that exists not for precision, but for optionality. Politicians know the numbers. They know that the debt cannot be paid forever. They know that interest payments will soon consume the entire federal budget, so they started preparing themselves mentally for the public. You can see this in speeches about strengthening money through innovation, in the balloon experiment of exploring alternative currency frameworks, in research reports on digital reserve assets, in congressional hearings where terms like strategic Bitcoin reserve suddenly appeared in official language. Here's how governments are implementing radical action. They standardize vocabulary before standardizing policy. And then the crisis happened. Not a catastrophic accident, not a sudden collapse, but it was a slow, suffocating erosion, feeling like the air was being sucked out of the room. Bond yields spiked, foreign buyers disappear, credit rating agencies downgrade U.S. credit rating. The battle over the debt ceiling is becoming urgent. Cable news is confusing, politicians criticize each other. And behind the scenes, the Treasury Department called an emergency meeting with the Federal Reserve. In that room, mathematics was undeniable. The message becomes clear. We cannot stabilize the system at current valuations. We need to reevaluate the foundation. Announcement changes everything. This incident happened on a morning that felt strangely peaceful. The president stepped up to the podium. The American flag stood behind him, shining in the cold, sterile light. The words are carefully chosen, tested, rehearsed, and sanitized. He announced the activation, Strategic Bitcoin Reserve. He announced the establishment of a revised gold pricing framework. He announced a new stable architecture for the 21st century. He does or not say the word reset. He does or not say devaluation. But he doesn't need to. Because hidden in the technical language, hidden within the footnotes and definitions, lies in the real meaning. The government currently values Bitcoin at $1,000 a coin for reserve purposes. The government currently sets the price of gold at $20,000 an ounce for reserve purposes. The camera captured the applause of the officials. The market recorded an earthquake. Bitcoin soars. Gold explodes. Dollar fluctuates. Because when the world's largest economic power announces higher valuations for the assets on its balance sheet, the global financial system immediately adjusts. This is not speculation. This is the law of money. The U.S. balance sheet suddenly showed trillions at new nominal value. The debt to GDP ratio fell immediately. Politicians declared victory. The public felt insecure, because while the numbers look clear on paper, the real world is changing beneath their feet. Reboot feelings of normal people. The reset is not done through policy documents. The reset is experienced through milk prices. At first, it feels like normal inflation. The grocery bill is slowly rising. Rent increased slightly. Add a little pressure to your monthly budget. But then, the slope got steeper. Rent increased by 20%, then 30%, Food prices doubled. The electricity bill tripled. Insurance premiums skyrocketed. Mortgage rates choked the housing market. Wages are lagging. Savings decrease in real terms. The bond portfolio is bleeding. Retirement accounts sink under inflationary pressure. Families began making calculations they never thought they would have to make. Do we have enough money to buy meat this week? Can we keep the house? Can we send our children to college? Should we move in with relatives? Will we ever retire? This is how the currency reset happens with a bang, but at a slow burn. And the middle class feels every spark, because the government doesn't need your permission to devalue your money. Just don't pay attention. But now, you realize. You notice this every time you check out at the grocery store, every time you fill up your car with gas, every time you open your electricity bill, you begin to understand something terrifying. Value does not disappear. It has been delivered, transferred from the payee to the asset holder, from saver to debtor, from cash to fixed assets, from the public to the government. Inflation is not a failure. Inflation is a tool, a peaceful weapon that leaves no fingerprints, yet still extracts wealth with mathematical precision. Winners celebrate. Losers search for answers. In every currency reset, there will be winners whose fortunes triple, and losers whose lives collapse. The winners this time are easy to guess. 1. The government is drowning in debt. They erased trillions in real obligations. They survived. They regained space to maneuver. 2. The first Bitcoin holders. Their patience paid off. Their wealth increased manifold. 3. Gold holders. Their metals became lifeboats in the storm of devaluation. 4. Companies with fixed assets. Real estate, infrastructure, commodities are all priced higher. 5. Foreign central banks holding gold, China, Russia, India, their treasury becomes war fund. What about the losers? 1. Saver people who believe in the dollar, people who believe that cash is safe. Their money melted. 2. Bondholders' pension fund, insurance companies, retiree. Every bond issued in depreciating dollars is a potential default. 3. Working class salary is delayed. The cost of living has skyrocketed. Stability is gone. 4. Retirees with fixed income assets increase, but fixed checks do not. 5. Small businesses. Caught between rising costs and customers no longer being able to pay anything. This is not an error. No surprise there. That is the desired result. Because when an empire is reestablished, it does not erase debt. It redistributes the pain. The reshaping of the global monetary landscape. The reset does not happen in isolation. Because while the US is revaluing gold and cryptocurrencies, the rest of the world is watching, closely, cautiously, and opportunistically. BRICS countries accelerate gold hoarding. Middle Eastern countries negotiate oil sales in local currencies. African and Asian countries are quietly diversifying their revenue sources away from the dollar. Economic blocs began to form. Commodity alliance, gold-backed payment system,